I'm Bob Newman from Gainesville, Florida. I'd like to introduce you to the Irish travelers. Historically, the travelers are nomadic. They number about 40,000 in the whole of Ireland. They are ethnically separate from Romani and Gypsies that originated in India. There are some Irish travelers in the United Kingdom, and maybe as many as 5,000 to 10,000 in the United States, but hard figures are difficult to come by. The travelers have a secret spoken language called gammon or cant that they use among themselves. Their history has been passed down by word of mouth. There's very little that's in written form. I first became interested in the Irish travelers when I saw these two images on Facebook about 5 years ago. I thought that the pictures were probably taken in the 1940s and 1950s. With some digging, I found out that they were made by an Irish photographer by the name of Joseph Philippe Bevillard. Actually, the pictures had been taken within the last 10 years. Joseph invited me to come to the Ballinsloe Horse Fair in 2016. Horse fairs are held all over the country. Of course, horses are bought and sold, and it's a major social event for the travelers. They see their friends, and teenagers can meet potential mates. Taking pictures at a horse fair is pretty easy. There are travelers everywhere. You strike up a conversation, then most are open to having their picture taken. One of the first pictures I took was of these twins, Margaret and Flowery. As you can see, they now have children of their own. After the horse fair, I had an opportunity to go to some of the traveler homes. They live in roadside camps and halting sites. I became intrigued with the travelers and their way of life. Since then, I've returned 12 times as part of a long-term 5-year project. Their homes are scattered all over Ireland. Since I began to visit the travelers, I've visited 22 different sites from Dublin south. The settled Irish sometimes use pejorative terms when referring to the travelers. Words like tinkers, pikeys, or dirty knackers. As you can imagine, this doesn't set very well. The Irish travelers prefer povvies, mink ears, or simply the word travelers. In 1963, the Irish government published an itinerancy report in which they sought to fix the travelers. In talking with the travelers, it is clear that they don't feel they need to be fixed and certainly don't want to be fixed. Also, this document proposed a so-called final solution, that being total integration of travelers into settled Irish society. This is reminiscent of treatment and language used in relationship to the blacks in the American South and during the Holocaust and the South African apartheid. Povvies have always been pushed to the margins of society as long as they've existed. It was only in 2017 that they were finally recognized by the Irish government as a separate ethnic group. Historically, travelers made their way around Ireland in painted horse-drawn wagons. During these times, there were many men who crafted these wagons. Now, there are only 2 remaining wagon makers, like the man pictured on the right, and those 2 gentlemen only do repairs. They performed jobs that helped everyone. They were tinsmiths, chimney sweeps, sold domestic wares, and bought and sold horses. But obviously, the world has changed, and now there's no need for tinsmiths and chimney sweeps. In 2002, an anti-trespassing law was passed. This was partly because the povvies parked on private property and then left trash behind them as they went on. Now, they can no longer travel at will. They can actually be fined if they're found out on the road. I mentioned that it was fairly easy to take pictures when you're at a horse fair. When you're at their homes, it's a different story. The travelers are usually very wary and cautious. They're afraid that you might be a newspaper reporter that's come to take pictures. The pictures will end up in a magazine someplace and portray them in a negative way. I think that something that is very helpful is to have someone provide an introduction to the people you are visiting. For me, that's my friend and fixer Joseph, He's the man on the right. He's been photographing the travelers for 10 years. This photograph was taken at Belcamp Lane in Dublin when we were visiting John Connors, a prominent actor who's also a traveler. I always return to see some of the same families. A good opener is to ask, "How you keepin'?" That's the Irish way of asking, "How are you doing?" As with anyone, when you treat travelers with respect, they respond in kind. One way of showing that respect is to ask permission before photographing. When I return, I always bring pictures from the last visit. They all have phones with cameras, but don't have a way to make paper pictures, and they love having the prints. When we pull up in the car, the children run out to ask if we brought them photos. After talking with them, we walk around the camp and gradually begin to photograph. The 1980s brought the Housing Act. In that document, the city councils were charged with providing housing for the travelers. Money is allotted every year, but very often that money is not used for traveler accommodations. In fact, now there are around 3,000 traveler families that do not have accommodations provided by the council. Most now live in extended family units, in roadside camps, or in halting sites. Those are often at the site of a dump or a landfill. Sometimes the sites are without electricity, running water, or toilet facilities. The travelers have to go to McDonald's to go to the bathroom or go to the swimming pool to bathe. It's mandatory for the traveler children to go to school with a settled Irish. Not long ago, they actually had to enter through a separate door. The teachers would strip the child and try to wash the traveler out of them, quite literally. Teachers sometimes refuse to teach traveler children and make them sit in the back of the room with a coloring book. Now, the traveler children have to spend only an hour and a half in school. They're then told that they can go home, with the teacher saying, "Why stay if you're not going to use the education? You're wasting my time." Most of the children drop out at the age of 12 to 14. Only a handful go on to upper level education. There are a few doctors, a handful of lawyers, and 2 women who have gotten their PhDs within the last couple of years. But very often, if they obtain additional education, upper level education, they don't admit their traveler heritage for fear of losing their business or losing their job. Girls are taught to act and dress provocatively, beginning at the time they're toddlers. They're not allowed to smoke, drink, or have sex until they marry, but they are expected to care for their other siblings. On average, they marry at age 17 to 18 and begin to have large families. The travelers are predominantly Irish Roman Catholic and sometimes have as many as 12, 14, or even 18 children. They love to get together and have a party, particularly at family events or religious events. Things like birthdays, christenings, first communions that occur when they're 8 years old, and confirmations at 10 to 11. After the event, they gather at a home or restaurant to celebrate with food and drink. Divorce occurs, but it's unusual in their community. The last time I was in Ireland, I got to spend some time with Willie and Nellie Riley. They raised 11 children in this barrel-topped gypsy trailer. They now have 130 grandchildren. Travelers face racism and discrimination on a regular basis. If a potential employer finds out that a person is a traveler, they usually won't hire them or they'll be fired. As a result, the unemployment rate is a staggering 84%. Men and boys spend a lot of time with their dogs and their horses. Alcohol addiction is common, and unfortunately, drug use is becoming more prevalent, particularly in the more metropolitan areas. With an unemployment rate of 84%, how in the world do the travelers get by? Sometimes they can make some money by buying and selling horses. Some pave driveways. But by and large, the majority of travelers get their money from an Irish government dole, which is passed out every week. They report to the post office to get that. The more children a family has, the more money they get. Healthcare is also a problem for the travelers. They're entitled to health care just like the settled Irish, but they tell me that it's very often difficult to get a doctor's appointment. When they call in, they're often given an appointment far in the future, or some type of excuse is made that they can't be seen right then. As a result, they struggle. 10% of traveler children die by the age of 2. 1/3 die by the age of 25. And 80% of all travelers are dead by the age of 65. Suicide is almost epidemic. 1 out of every 11 traveler deaths each year is a suicide. I know of one extended family based in Limerick that's had 12 suicides in their family in the last 5 years. Sometimes the travelers cause problems for themselves. They drink, they fight, and some run scams. To be sure, there are some bad apples among the traveler community, just like there are in every community and every race. By and large, they're good people, and it really seems unfair to paint them all with the same brush. COVID-19 is a big problem for the Irish travelers. Remembering that they have only 3 or 4 bedrooms at most and 8 to 10 children, if someone gets sick, it's impossible to separate the children. There are some efforts afoot to try and get them more trailers and give them more space, but as usual, there's resistance. One might ask, why do I keep going back? I've thought a lot about that. When I first started doing photography, I would go to a location, usually on a photo tour, stay for a week or 2 and take pictures. And I had a great time, but I usually didn't go back to the same location. I decided to go back a second time to see the Irish travelers because it happened to be a different event. Each time I go back to visit the travelers, something is different. Someone new is there. Something has happened. There's something new in the travelers' lives. I learn more and I become more interested in what they do and how they live. This is an example of how things can change. The photograph on the left was taken at the Puck Horse Fair. On the right, you see the same girls about 1 year later in their home. I've been impressed that the travelers are resilient, proud, and dignified. They want to be part of Irish society, but at the same time, they want to maintain their own culture and traditions. This dichotomy makes finding middle ground with the settled Irish an ever-present challenge. Now that I've told you a little bit about the travelers, I'd like to show you a series of images. As you look at the photographs, remember what the travelers' lives are like. You'll see that some of the children look older than their years. It's difficult to grow up as a traveler child.